Hello, I'm Matt Pinson, president of Welch College, and it's a privilege to welcome you to our webinar for the annual session of the National Association of Free Will Baptists. And we're going to be talking about the impact that the coronavirus has had on Welch College and what we've learned about that regarding leading in crisis and some of the ways that it's going to impact us in this next school year and even into the future. And so it's good to have Dr. Matthew McAffee, our provost, with us. And it's also good to have Daniel Webster, our director of enrollment services. He will be kind of moderating the session and asking us questions. And then Dr. Matthew McAfee and I will be responding and kind of discussing the ways that COVID-19 has impacted us and will impact us into the future. So Daniel, I'm going to hand it over to you and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. I've got a few questions here that we can look at together, and I've jotted some down as I've just been around the Welch community these last few months as we've navigated the crisis here, especially the coronavirus, COVID-19. And I'll alternate questions with the two of you. And if you have something you'd like to weigh in and add to the question, please feel free to do that. Let's start with Dr. Pinson. If you want to just start off, I'd like to hear some of the things that you've learned throughout the coronavirus pandemic. Obviously, you've been president here at Welch College for many years, and you've never faced something quite like this. And so I'd be interested just to hear your thoughts now. What is it that you've learned?
Well, one of the things I've learned is that we have to listen to our people. And you have different opinions on these matters, and some people are coming from a very different point of view on the coronavirus, on its impact on communities such as ours. Some people are very cautious. Other people are less concerned about the impact of the virus. And so what we have to do is find a way to create an atmosphere of unity and of non-judgmentalism regarding people who have different opinions on something that is not a matter of faith and it's not a matter of practice and our theological point of view. And so we have to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And we have to lead from the center and lead from a place that brings about a sense of unity amongst our faculty and staff and students. And I think every church has to do that. Every nonprofit and every organization is going to need to do that. Another thing that I've learned through this is that people need pastoral care. People need shepherding. People need them to understand them, need their leaders to understand them as whole persons. I think back a lot about Leroy Forlines's constant harping on the need to understand people as total personalities, intellect, emotions, and behavior, will. And so, you know, sometimes when you have a crisis of this magnitude, you get into a kind of hunker down mentality where you have a just the facts ma'am approach to things. And we have to realize that God has created the people we lead as total personalities, and we need to minister to them as spiritual people who think with their minds, who feel with their hearts, and who make free choices and have wills and have conduct and behavior. So we have to bring all that into to focus as we minister to the whole person. And so this, when you have a crisis like this is an opportunity for ministry. You know, they used to say that the Chinese character for crisis and for opportunity are the same. And so indeed, crises such as this create opportunities for ministry and to show people what we really mean when we're talking about creating Christian community and bringing people together in unity in the body of Christ. So those are just a couple of things that I've learned through this.
Yeah, that's good. And I like your emphasis there that if it's about the heart and the mind and the body outside of the crisis, you know, the habits we form outside of the crisis are the way we're going to respond within the crisis. And so, and obviously here at Welch, we're all about the whole person even when we're not in the pandemic. Dr. McAfee, is there anything there that you'd like to add?
I would just say, reiterate what President Pinson says about, the personal side of it and the total personality. We can learn about the details of what's happening, what we're being told, the facts of what's going on. But there's also the other side of it. The other story is the personal toll that people are experiencing, and that emotional side that's so important for us to account for when we're trying to deal with these kinds of things. So I think that's a great reminder.
Yeah, and as you talk about the personal side of things, I know obviously you're interacting with students, and when it comes to academics, the student concern is at the top of your list as you work with the people that we're here to serve, and that's our students. So talk to us a little bit about student and academic life. How is COVID-19 and this pandemic we've been through, how has the student and academic life been affected this past spring?
Well, it's been drastically affected, obviously. When we found out that we were going to have to send or not have students come back from the spring break because of the shutdown of our economy and of the world, it's amazing how many things you don't think about that are just kind of mundane things that we had to start planning for. Things like small groups and the student societies and meetings and all of these kinds of things, in addition to the challenge of dealing with the classroom. Thankfully, when we moved campuses back a few years ago, our faculty had to do that same kind of thing, putting their classes completely online for a period of a month or so. So in terms of preparedness, I think we were at a good place in terms of our faculty being able to make those adjustments, even though that was challenging, to an online delivery. But picking up on the personal side of it again, we didn't want to just provide content and deliver the content to our students in a virtual way, but we wanted to continue to have those personal connections with our students. So we utilized some technology that allowed us to do video lectures, video conferencing, where we had live interaction with our students. And I think that, as a professor myself, I found that to be, it wasn't as good as being face-to-face, but it was certainly better than not having any of that interaction whatsoever. So the academic challenges were kind of front and center as we tried to make those plans and change our schedules and everything to accommodate an online delivery. And I think we were successful in finishing the year. It was a strange year, but we had graduates, and we were able to honor those graduates through a virtual ceremony that we did live. So we were learning as we went, but learned a lot of things along the way. But things were drastically changed or challenged, but I think Welch was still intact, and we were still able to fulfill our mission in a very strange semester in trying to help these students finish their year.
Yeah. And so, Dr. Pinson, while Dr. McAfee was over spinning plates and on the academic side of things, you're over on the leadership side and trying to keep things together. So talk to us from your perspective over in the president's office. What are some leadership challenges that you all faced?
Obviously the first thing that happened was all the students had to leave campus. We had, I guess, about 10 or 11 that stayed on in various capacities, but the vast majority of students had to get out of the dorms, and we actually had them come back later and sign up for times when they and or their parents would move them out of the dorms. But that obviously was a lot to manage, and it affected us greatly financially. We had to, because we refunded them what they had already paid us on room and board fees. And so that cost us a lot of money. It left the campus just barren, and it's just not the same. Of course, every summer it's a little bit less crowded than it normally is, but you still have some students on campus, and you still have some life. And since all this happened, it's just really been different walking around the campus and the kind of the lack of vibrancy of those young people around the campus. But financially, it's where it's really hit us because we lost that income that we normally would get from room and board, and we also lost a great deal of gift income because March, April, and May are our three top fundraising months of the year. That's when we get out and we, especially with regard to our capital campaign, we get out and we raise money to pay off this new campus. And we talk with people, and we're asking people in this process to give a 5-year pledge and to give the greatest gift they've ever given to Welch College. The greatest building project that we've ever had in the history of the National Association of Free Will Baptists. And so when you get into the middle of a global pandemic and people are losing their jobs and you have the highest unemployment rate in many, many decades, and then the stock market starts to go down and people's financial portfolios are impaired and they are afraid and concerned, then not only are you not able to go out and have face-to-face meetings because of COVID-19, even those donors who are willing to have a video conference with you, you just don't feel comfortable asking them to do the biggest thing they've ever done for Welch College at this time. So frankly, we lost several $100,000 in gift income because we basically had to shut down our fundraising operation in the 3 most important months of any fundraising year. So in between the loss of income on the room and board side and the huge loss of income from having to shelve our fundraising operation for 3 months, for the most important 3 months of the year, and the extra costs that we incurred that were COVID-19 related costs, it's been a very difficult year for us. Now, the Free Will Baptist Foundation did come through with a $400,000 grant, and so that has been very, very good. We also got the PPP loan from the federal government, and that has helped us with cash flow. And I'll tell you, really, our cash flow situation is not what I'm concerned about as much as, balancing the budget. And we're looking at an $800,000 or $900,000 deficit this year. It's going to be the greatest deficit we've ever had at the college for the year we've just come out of, and probably something similar for this next year. And we're very confident that we can make it through and we can survive this storm. Al Mohler was doing some research, shared some research that he had done on a recent program, and he said that 20% of colleges and universities are going to probably go out of existence. So, we're very thankful that that's not going to be us, and that we have the ability cash-wise to make it through this thing and to pay our bills and to keep our head above water and to make it through. But it's not going to be a pretty picture on the books, and it's going to be some of the worst deficits we've ever had. And that's why we need people to continue to help us and to continue to support us, and especially the students whose parents have lost jobs and students who are concerned that they can't pay their bills. We started this COVID-19 student relief fund, and money's coming in for that because there are students that we want to be able to say, hey, we've got some extra scholarship money to make it possible for you to do this, even though your parents, don't see their way clear to do it. And so we need our supporters to come to our aid now more than ever. And some of them are not going to be able to, because we've got some donors who normally are very solid supporters of Welch who have lost their jobs or whose portfolios have been impaired and they just can't help us right now. But we've got some who still can. And we're asking you, if you're a donor to Welch College, if you've supported us in the past, help our students. Give an extra gift to this COVID-19 Student Relief Fund so that they can realize their dream and their calling to come to Welch College to prepare for leadership and service for Christ, His church, and His world. So that's a little bit about where I am from a 30,000 foot level of survival. Okay, my main job is this college and this legacy is going to survive. And no matter what we have to do, we're going to do this, and we're going to survive. And I feel confident about that. But I'm going to tell you, we're going to have challenges, and we need our people to come and to our aid and to our support if they can, more than ever. So.
I will say on a personal level, I appreciate your determination and your vision to say, we're going to get through this. It's going to be hard, but we're going to get through this. So we've talked a lot about the past and, what we've been through. I was looking on social media today and someone says, it still feels like it's the month of March. It still feels like we're trying to get through this thing. We've talked about the past. Let's look ahead to the future here. And Dr. McAfee, let's turn to you and let's hear a little bit about some plans that we have in place for this fall.
Yeah, the challenges, some of the major challenges in just functioning and getting things back up and running again is really what this fall is all about. And we have been working this summer to finalize our more detailed plan of what we're going to do. That's going to be publicized here shortly. So there'll be a lot more details that will be made known to our faculty and students as we send that out. But in looking at the fall, we're going to try to do everything that we can to observe the best practices. We're trying to look at what other colleges and universities are doing. We've been analyzing their plans. The special committee on the coronavirus has been combing through those kinds of documentation, those kinds of documents that we've been able to see and try to put ourselves somewhere in the middle of where best practices are. We want to be sensitive to those, both of those groups that the president mentioned, those who tend to be more concerned about the dangers of the coronavirus, but then also those who are not as concerned about the dangers of that, and try to balance our approach to these things with all of those considerations in mind, keeping abreast of what's going on with guidelines from the government, federal government, and state and local governments. So we're really trying to pattern our classrooms. We're glad to be able to move forward with having students come back on campus. I mean, that's our big goal, is to be able to get to a point where we can have the students come back, and so that's what we're working toward. We're going to have students here in the fall on campus in the dorms, and we're excited about that. I think in spite of the challenges that we've faced as an institution, as things that the president has mentioned, there are some positive things about being a smaller institution like ours when we start thinking about social distancing and mapping out classroom sizes, being able to make adjustments quite quickly. Whereas larger institutions that have large classroom sizes, it's just untenable to do that kind of thing. So we've been able to capitalize on that and make plans for having all of our classes in a face-to-face context here. We're going to be it'll be a different kind of semester. We're going to be, trying to follow those guidelines, and we'll be monitoring those as they change and trying to make adjustments to our plans. But we're going to emphasize to try to keep our faculty, staff, and students safe, and have a safe environment that students can come back to and learn and engage in mentoring. But it's going to be an unusual fall semester because of these things that we're putting in place. So we're prayerful about the fall. We're excited about the fall, but yet we're a bit, approaching it with fear and trepidation as we try to implement this plan in having students on campus in a responsible way.
Yeah, and Dr. Pinson, as we think about, the fall and opening up, I wondered if you might just weigh in on the strengths of Welch College that we have that are going to help us move forward successfully in this fall. I mean, let's face it, being a small Christian college with Christian ideas and that are countercultural, it's not easy having a Christian college in the first place. And so but what are the strengths that will help us as we enter into this fall?
Well, just like Dr. McAfee mentioned, being a smaller school, we already have a lot of strengths that make it easier for us to manage this thing. Most of our classes have fewer than 20 students in them. When you get up to the major level, like in the junior and senior year, a lot of your classes have fewer than 10. And so that's one of our strong points. We got a 9-to-1, 10-to-1 student faculty ratio, depending on which year you look at, for the last several years, which most small, less academically selective institutions like ours don't have that good of a faculty student ratio, but we do. And so what that means is, when you're already planning to have most of your classes have fewer than 20, and there are only a handful of classes that have between 20 and 50, you're able to do this. So, we've laid out all of our classrooms and made sure that every chair, every desk is socially distanced. And, we're going to have plexiglass in front of the teachers and that kind of thing, where they can kind of have a little more freedom and teach, and yet still be appropriately distanced physically. And then, of course, for our larger classrooms, our larger courses, we're going to be using areas that we normally don't use, such as the auditorium and the gym and the president's dining room, which are larger rooms that we normally don't teach in. But you'll be able to have bigger groups of students and still have their desks and so forth 6 feet apart and appropriately socially distanced. And so, a lot of schools are having to go to hybrid things, to where that only half or a third of their teaching is going on face to face. A lot of schools are having to set up tents outside, but we're not having to do any of that because we're already small enough to be able to accommodate this. So that's the really good thing. I don't know, Dr. McAfee, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think, from the most recent report we got from them, I don't think we're going to have a single class that is either hybrid or online for the college-age students. So that's a really good thing, that going into this, we already have the economies of scale that we can accommodate this. But here's another thing. Going into the coronavirus, we were strong. You can't say that about every college and university. For example, in TCUA, we're in the Tennessee Independent Colleges and Universities Association. And when you look at the, 33 or 34 schools that we're, with in TCUA, the last 5 years, the average loss of full-time equivalent enrollment has been like 0.5%. So, essentially you could say that TCUA schools have held their own. They've only lost about 0.5% of FTE enrollment. FTE means full-time equivalent. And that's really what you want to look at, not head count, but full-time equivalent enrollment. And so when you look at the fact that that TCUA as a whole, Tennessee private colleges have lost 0.5% roughly of their FTE enrollment. And that's over a 5-year period, we've gained 18% in full-time equivalent enrollment. So see, we're at a counter trend to the plateau and declining of higher education full-time equivalent enrollment. We're bucking that trend. And in fact, we were second in the sector. We were the second fastest growing enrollment in the last 5 years in all of TCUA. We were beat out by one larger school that's had greater growth. But out of 33, 34 schools in TCUA, being the second fastest growing, that has positioned us to be able to weather this storm. And like I said a moment ago, it's going to beat up on us. It's going to be very tough. It's been tough getting through the last several months. From now until August 2021, we predict some amazing challenges that are going to be very tough to withstand. And yet, because we had the new campus, So a few years ago, several years ago, we changed our name, and we're now just starting to reap the benefits of that new branding. But then when you add this new campus to that, and all the new programs we've added, and the excitement that we have, bucking the trends of enrollment malaise in higher education has really positioned us to be able to withstand this pandemic and to come out stronger as a result. And so I think it's important for me to make that statement about, not only did we come into this with the economies of scale that make it possible for us to do this, but we were stronger, in terms of our enrollment, in terms of finances, in terms of cash going into this thing. And that's going to help us. That's really going to help us survive. Now, I would say this, one of the things that we don't have going for us that a lot of schools do, as Dr. McAfee mentioned, we're going to be very cautious to provide a very safe and secure environment for these students coming back. Because, we've got to answer to every parent. It's to say, we're going to have parents that are not that concerned about the coronavirus, but we're going to have parents that are very, very concerned about the health and safety of their student here. And we want to provide an atmosphere of unity, and yet an atmosphere that says to people, hey, you can trust us to provide a safe, secure, healthy environment. So that's why we're going to be taking temperatures, and we've got an app that we're planning to roll out where you take your temperature, you put in your temperature, it gives you a yellow light, red light, green light. We're going to have masks and social distancing and all sorts of other things that help us to ensure the health and safety of our students. And one of the reasons that's so important for us is because we have a new campus that we just built 3 years ago. And so that means we don't have all this excess dorm space. So in other words, when you go back to what I said a minute ago, that you kind of got a plateaued and declining dorm student enrollment at most private and public colleges and universities. And that means, and like we used to, they've had university campuses that they've had and dorms that they've had built for 50 and 100 years. And so they got all this extra dorm space on their hands that they're not using. So when it comes to a quarantine wing and being ready for a certain number of your students always to have to be in 14-day quarantine, they're ready to go, because they've got all this extra space. We don't. And so we're being very careful because we can't afford, but for so many of our students to be in a quarantine wing, and we don't want to start having to send students home. And so that's one of the variables that's a little bit different about our school, is we just don't have a whole bunch of extra, quarantine space because we have a campus that we've just built, and we don't have all this extra dorm space left over from the heyday years. So, but I think that overall we are very well positioned coming into this thing to weather the storm and to come out stronger. So what we're trying to do is to communicate to our people a balance that we are well positioned. We think we can weather this storm. We're confident we can. And yet we need your help. If you can still help, and if you're in a position to still help us financially, we need it now more than ever to help to mitigate the difficulties that we're going to experience.
So you've talked about strengths. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about strategy. What are, and maybe this is as much an issue of stewardship. So you take our strengths and you evaluate those, and then you develop a strategic plan. I wonder if you could just touch on our strategic priorities to maximize these strengths as we move into the future as a follow-up here.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting because Dr. McAfee and I were just in a leadership team meeting yesterday for about 2.5 hours, and we're doing a strategic plan. And I've asked our leadership team, and of course we've done all the focus groups and we've done the SWOT analyses and all the stuff that you do in strategic planning with all of our different constituencies. And I've asked the leadership team to dream big. And, we started this months ago before the coronavirus set in. And I was saying, let's have some audacious goals and some dreams that we put on our strategic plan. Because, we've got some people that because of the college's growth and because of the new campus, we've got some people that have really taken an interest in the school, and they feel like the Lord has laid it on their hearts. And some people that have the ability to really help us financially in the future and to help us grow. And of course, with COVID-19, that's kind of on hold right now. But we're going to have, I believe we're going to have some donors that come alongside of us and that the Lord really uses to help us go to the next level and really have more growth than we've ever had in the history of the institution. So I'm asking the leadership team, okay, dream big and let's do a strategic plan that's really big. Okay, and so then you get hit with this COVID-19 thing, and then you kind of shelve that process for a while, and now we're getting back into the strategic planning process, and it's just kind of tough, because we've got all these problems and got all these challenges, and so for the next year and a half, our plan is to survive. And it's going to be tough, and it's going to be ugly, and there's going to be lots of cuts and slashing the budget. And so it's hard to come in and have a rah, cheerleading, strategic planning, dream big session when you're sitting here talking about slashing the budget. And that, the main strategic plan for the next year and a half is survival. But let me tell you, because we're poised for growth and because we were in a good spot, before the coronavirus hit us, I think that we're still going to be able to see some great things in the future. Some of the things we talked about just yesterday were things like, a Master of Divinity program that would kind of work with our existing programs, such as our MA in Theology and Ministry, to allow people to come on campus and to complete a residential 3-year Master of Divinity program on our campus, to have a divinity school. So that's a dream that I think, that we're really going to see happen very soon. The other programs like Master of Arts degree in organizational leadership, that would probably be a hybrid program that would allow people who aren't necessarily in ministry, but who are in the nonprofit world to come in and get a master's degree from a Christian perspective in organizational leadership. Dr. McAfee, what are some of the undergraduate programs that we're kind of brainstorming about? And again, this is not official. These are just sort of some things that we've been brainstorming about at the leadership level.
Well, we've talked about, PP&E program, politics, economics, and trying to take philosophy, politics, and economics, trying to take courses that we already have and build on those things in our undergraduate programs to maximize what we have and develop other programs off of those. We've talked about, in engineering, 2+2 programs, or maybe even a 3+2 nursing agreement with another institution where a student would work with us for 3 years and then go on to another institution for 2 years and finish a graduate degree. So, and then looking for new ways and new combinations that we might come up with from existing courses, like, a classics degree or a ancient languages, or just trying to find ways that we can maximize the things that we're already doing and capitalize on those things. So, there are lots of opportunities in our undergraduate program, undergraduate courses, adult programs that are, as you mentioned, hybrid. So, there are lots of exciting possibilities for us in program growth that I think that will be very attainable once we get past this COVID crisis.
And Daniel, you and Dr. McAfee have both heard me dream about, the real dream here is to keep expanding this beautiful new campus. And I believe that we've got some folks out there that the Lord is going to use to make this possible, to build a chapel on this campus, a large, 1,400 seat chapel that would be one of the largest chapels in Middle Tennessee. I really believe that we're going to see that. I think once we get out of this COVID-19, and the economy bounces back and we continue to grow, I think that we're going to have that. I think I could see a brand new auditorium here that was a fine arts auditorium. In addition to the chapel, I could see a cafe bookstore, a beautiful student hangout space that would be there. And of course, we're going to need new classrooms and new offices as we grow, new housing for the new students that come in after we bounce back and come out of this crisis. I really think we're going to see all that. And I think that God is going to bless us. But like I said, it's kind of hard to dream big when for the next year and a half, your main strategic plan is survival. So I told the leadership team yesterday. I said, we were planning on having a 5-year strategic plan, but since the next year and a half or so is going to be survival, maybe we should make it a 7-year strategic plan, since we're really not going to be able to get to the strategy part in terms of long-range future planning and growth until after we weather this storm. But we want the people who are watching this, this webinar, we want them to pray, and we need your prayers, and we need you to support and to do more than you've ever done before, because this ministry, church historians will tell us that the way denominational educational institutions go is the way denominations go. And when you have a strong, vibrant, denominational educational institution that is committed to mission, committed to the Great Commission, committed to theologically Bible-based education for a denomination, that is going to produce a vibrant denomination. So education is at the core and the heart. When you look at all the missionaries, when you look at 80+% of missionaries in our denomination are from our college, graduate degrees from our college. More than half of pastors and other ministers, and all of the people who work at our denominational agencies and at the state agencies and camps and children's homes who have been educated at Welch College. A strong denominational educational institution is at the heart of a strong, vibrant denomination. And so our denomination is, like all denominations, is going to have some tough sledding ahead as we continue into a very challenging post-Christian, increasingly secularizing environment. So we need education and training for our laity and for our ministry now more than ever. And so that's why I want to appeal to our listeners and appeal to those who have supported us in the past. If you can still do it, support us and continue to come alongside of us, because God has some great things in store for us ahead. But first of all, we just need to get through this tough time.
Yeah, and I would add, sometimes during a crisis, even a worldwide crisis, our tendency might be to say, just stop these types of things. Why would you be building? Why would you be starting programs? That tends to be our tendency. But I would just remind us, and you all know this better, this college was started during World War II. And so this is the MO for Welch College. And World War II, you hear stories of culture making on the front lines, soldiers celebrating Christmas and sending beautiful letters home to family. And this is what you do during hard times.
I got such an encouraging note yesterday from one of our alumni. Both of y'all know Larry Hampton, and he sent me just such an encouraging handwritten note. And he said, "Man, I want you to remind yourself that God is going to see us through, that this school was founded on the heels of the Great Depression, right in the middle of World War II."
That's right.
And that was so encouraging to me. And it's true. God has a purpose here. And God has brought us out to this beautiful new campus for a reason and for a purpose. And he's going to sustain us. And I think the best is yet to come.
Yeah. I would agree. Well, as we wrap things up, I would like us to think about just Christian higher education in general. And perhaps both of you could just say a word about how do you think Christian higher education will be changed in the future in light of coronavirus? Perhaps will be changed for the good or changed for the bad. What are your thoughts, Dr. McAfee? Let's start with you. And where do you see Christian higher education? What are the changes that we are kind of bracing for, I suppose?
Well, what you hear from folks talking about this, everyone seems to agree that things will never be exactly the same in higher ed moving forward. So I do think we need to recognize that the things that we're going through right now are going to reshape and refashion a lot of things in the future. One of the things that we've seen faculty adapting in their teaching, utilizing technology, utilizing a lot of resources that, if this crisis had happened, 10 years ago, we wouldn't have had access to a lot of the things that we have access to now. So a lot of the video conferencing and different technology-based enhancements that have been utilized in this remote setting, I can see, and I've heard, faculty members comment on, I can see how this will enhance my teaching in the future. There are a lot of things that I've been forced to do and have been able to see how this works and really supports what I'm doing, and will continue to incorporate that. On the other hand, the other side of it is, I think this has reminded us, this whole crisis has reminded us of how important face-to-face interaction really is. And, students, at least our students, the overwhelming sentiment that they share is that they want to be on campus. They want to be in classes. They want to be able to be here and engage with one another, live in community with one another, engage with their professors, and have that in college embodied experience. So I think it maybe helps us to appreciate that, and so there's kind of a both and. We see we don't want to take for granted the need that we have of community and being together in a community like this, where we're devoting ourselves to mentoring and learning and teaching. Yet at the same time, looking at opportunities that this has brought to our attention that we maybe wouldn't have had access to, or we wouldn't have been aware of before. So I think we have to take the good and try to utilize it in a way that is missionally in line with who we are as an institution. Our deeply held values and our Christian heritage and Free Will Baptist heritage that we are trying to embody and inculcate in our students and hand down to future generations. So I think there are opportunities and challenges for sure. I think that the negative side of it is it's going to be difficult, as the president mentioned, as we see other institutions, many institutions not able to make it through the crisis. So you don't like to see sister institutions or fellow institutions go under, but you're realizing just how much is at stake and how important it is for us to keep our sensibility and make wise decisions and be careful and try to do the very best we can to preserve what we have been given and hand it on down to future generations.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Pinson, I'll give you the last word, and if you want to follow up there on how do you think Christian higher education will change down the road, and then you can close us out.
I agree with everything Dr. McAfee has said. I think there's always going to be especially in our denomination, a call for and a desire for the kind of community that is created on a campus like this. I mean, so many of our students are people from our denomination, students from our denomination who they've encountered our reps at camps. and at summer experiences and at Truth and Peace and E-Team. And that's why they come here. That's why they choose to come to Welch College, because of the embodied experience of being together in community, face to face on this campus, and the spirit that you have when you walk on this campus. And that's why our enrollment is dependent upon getting high school students on this campus so that they can experience the spirit here. But at the same time, I think that that this has caused us to pay more attention to the importance of technological savvy, and to be able to do what is necessary to keep up with the times, and to be able to pivot when need be, and to utilize the technology that we have at our disposal. And so we can do a better job at doing that. And so I think that Dr. McAfee's right, and I think this is going to poise us for better things in the future.
Before we came on the air here, we opened up our time with a word of prayer, and perhaps we should close our time here together. So, Dr. Pinson, why don't you just close us in a time of prayer?
Let us pray. Our God, we thank you for Welch College and for your calling it into existence in 1942 to educate leaders to serve Christ, his church, and his world through biblical thought and life. We thank you that we still maintain our mission, which has God's word at the center of all the education we do, in training people to be ministers and missionaries and Great Commission-minded people, but also to bring lay people into this institution so that they can be trained to be salt and light out in the professions, and to be leaders, lay leaders in their local churches, to be Great Commission-minded people. And so we pray that you would continue to sustain us, and that you would lead us in these difficult times, and that you would help us to be your hands and your feet in this world. And bless us and keep us, and lift the light of your countenance upon us, and be gracious unto us, and grant us your peace in the coming months ahead as we struggle through this crisis, but forever. And be with us, we pray, in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
And